Métis Nation. We respect the treaties that have been made on these territories. We acknowledge that there have been harms and mistakes in the past, but we dedicate ourselves to a future based on respect of all people, including Indigenous communities, in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration, moving forward to a harmonious, prosperous future together. I will entertain a motion to adopt the meeting agenda of May 9th, 2023. Mover?
Andrew?
Second?
Marvin?
Any additions to that agenda?
Nope.
All those in favor? And that is carried. Be it resolved that the minutes of the regular council meeting of April 25th, 2023 be adopted. Mover?
Don Fair.
Second?
Peter.
Any comments or thoughts on those minutes? All in favor? And that is carried. Continuing into our correspondence, we have a couple of pieces there. Any comments on anything that we see there? We see our Municipal Relations Green Team funding, 2023. That's up nicely over last year. That's good to see. We have the Manitoba Agricultural Hall of Fame notice of meeting. No comments on that. We'll continue on to our finances. Be it resolved that accounts payable in the amount of $1,098,368.12, as approved by the Finance Committee, be approved for payment. Mover?
Andrew?
Second?
Don Friesen.
The check register, as always, attached. Any questions on what you see there? All in favor? And that is carried.
Can you speak a little louder?
I certainly can. My apologies. Be it resolved that the Winkler Fire Department report for April 2023 be received for information. Mover?
Don Fair.
Second.
Michael?
Any
Any comments on those minutes, gentlemen?
One thing I'd like to highlight, I was talking to Richard Patesold last week, and he was just telling me that he was taking, I believe it's called trench training, where I never heard of that before, but with all the excavation going on around here, if somebody gets caught up in a trench, like there's a collapse,
Yep.
it was very extensive training on how they put large beams in there and just so it tries to make it safe to get the person out of there. He showed me some pictures and I was really impressed and thankful that we have a fire department that actually has this type of training where most fire departments don't even think of having training like this. We're very fortunate that our fire department takes these initiatives to make our community safer.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Further thoughts or comments? All in favor? And that is carried. Moving on to Transportation and Utilities, be it resolved that the Transportation and Utilities Committee minutes for the April 11th, 2023 meeting be adopted. Mover?
Marvin?
Second?
Andrew?
Minutes are attached. Do you have any comments, anything to add that we should be aware of, Marvin?
I don't know, I guess one of the things is that we're going, there's a couple of projects that we're looking at completing in town, and we're looking at ways to do it because some of them came in a little bit over budget, so we're working on that.
Well, that's good to see, and part of the reason that we expended an additional just over $500,000 towards that, to be able to help make these projects that we know need to happen. And it is interesting when we talk to our staff, We generally have a formula that gives us a pretty good idea what each meter of road or street is going to cost us. We expected a significant inflationary increase last year, and we're pleasantly surprised not to see it. And this year, we're seeing it. I think there's a few other thoughts on those particular projects that made them a bit more expensive, but ultimately, that huge inflationary cost that we cannot seem to get away from is now right here.
Yeah.
Any other comments? All in favor? And that is carried. Be it resolved that the water and sewer report for April 2023 be received for information. Mover?
Marvin?
Second?
Andrew?
Anything there that we should be particularly aware of?
Nope, fairly on
Everything
track
looks-
with last year, so.
Yep. Okay. All in favor? And we're carried. Moving on into planning. Be it resolved that bylaw 2306-23 be given first reading. Mover.
Don Friesen.
Second.
Peter? No, go ahead.
Peter got that one. As we know, whenever we give first reading, we simply put something on the agenda that allows it to be advertised for public hearing. Your site plan is attached, but outside of that, the rest of the information will come to us later.
Yep.
Any thoughts or comments? Okay, all in favor? And we're carried. Be it resolved that the Discover Nature Sanctuary minutes for the March 28th, 2023 meeting be received for information. Mover.
Michael.
Second.
Marvin?
Minutes are attached. Any comments on those minutes?
I guess it's just in general, it's always nice to see this group of very energetic people coming out with idea and putting things in place, making it an awesome point of interest and something to do for tourists as well as our citizens.
It absolutely is.
It's interesting that they don't have a water festival this year. Is there any, there's no reason stated for it. Just wondering why it got postponed this year.
It's an interesting question. I wouldn't have a note of it, but certainly we can reach out to Paul and ask. If you don't mind, Jody, we'll send a note.
That's
Thank you.
It's always a big deal for the schools to go and visit during that water festival.
Nice. Not seeing any other comments. All in favor? Carried. That brings us to delegations and public hearings. Be it resolved that this regular meeting of council recess for the purpose of holding public hearings. Mover.
Andrew?
Second.
Peter?
All in favor? Carried.
So I'll just introduce, we have 3 public hearings that we're holding today. And if any of you wish to participate in that process, when it's time for that, we'll let you know. And then we would ask that you step to the podium and state your name and address, and then you can provide your comments or questions. That should be directed to the chair, who's our Mayor Siemens. And then that's the way we'll do that. So I'll start with the first one. We have a conditional use application, CU 2023-003. The request here is in order to allow an eating and drinking establishment in the institutional zone, and in order to allow 2 principal uses to operate within the same building on the same site. So that being community recreation service and the eating and drinking establishment. The applicant here is WBS Construction on behalf of 3388-299 Manitoba Limited. and the location is 545 Industrial Drive. And our office has not received any objections to this application. And there's a report to council attached with recommendations and on the approval.
Thank you very much, Jody. Is there anyone here to speak to this proposal? Either for or against any comments that need to be made? Not seeing anything here. Be it resolved that public hearing for conditional use number CU 2023-003 be closed. Mover?
Michael?
Second.
Marvin?
Marvin's got it. Any thoughts or questions, council? All in favor? Hearing is closed. Be it resolved that council approve conditional use number CU 2023-003. Mover?
Don Fair?
Second.
Peter?
Peter got that one. No questions from council?
Oh, the
All
bunker
in
wants
favor?
to have some food there. Makes sense, yeah.
Yep. Passed. There you go, Kevin. Jody, I'll give it back to you.
Second public hearing is for conditional use application CU 2023-004. The request is in order to allow an accessory dwelling unit in the CG Commercial General Zone. And this is on behalf of the applicant and owner Wink City Signs, located at 335 Kimberly Road. Again, we have not received any objections to this application, and we have a report to council attached.
Is there anyone here to speak to this? Christine, yes, please, if you would. I should state while Christine is on her way to the front, I have to declare an interest in that my business is also in the signage game. As this application has absolutely nothing to do with signage, unless council would prefer, I would like to stay here.
Yeah.
Okay. Jody, let the minutes state that. Christine, please go ahead.
Okay, I've been at Wink City Signs for 16 years, and the past couple of years, especially while the winters have been very bad for driving, a few nights on the couch so that I can stay and work and look after my people. I work with my son, and the thought of having the business in our work, or our home in a dwelling in the workspace is, we can always be there, for one, which is important. I do live a half hour away. It would save money on gas. This is what, anyway, what we are applying for. And it's also a very fun place to be after hours. And we are both very creative, and the nice part is being there to do that. So we are hoping to somehow make this work. I know there is a couple options. The first option is about our space, and that's what we are working towards now, and seeing what we can do with that.
Excellent. Does anyone have questions of Christine?
So it'd be somebody, like, somebody would permanently live there then, or just, is it a place to kind of crash?
It would be permanent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know one of the, oh, I
It
guess.
is also a nice way to transition my son into ownership
Mhm.
and carry on, so.
I don't know when you want us to start asking questions about some of the report there, but like the school-aged children portion is one concern, like, I'm assuming that that report has noted that there's no school-aged children residing there in the proposal, but that's probably something long-term that, how do we,
But if it'd be a conditional use,
You just gotta have kids, or what?
You can't have kids, you can't have any
Well,
more kids.
I mean,
There you go. You gotta work.
I sometimes leave my child unattended in the car when I go.
If I may, Henry.
Please, Jody, I'd appreciate it.
So in general, when we're being more permissive with these type of dwelling units in these zones, we have very limited number of square feet for the dwelling unit to
Right.
discourage that type of thing where you're bringing families in. It isn't meant for this. This is something that is a more recent change to our zoning to allow these types of uses to be flexible with housing. So there are some parameters within the zoning bylaw to try to prevent some of those types of issues.
okay, thanks.
Any other comments or questions of Christine? Is there anyone else here to speak to this evening? I think we're good for now, Christine, if you're, feel free to grab a
Unless
seat
you have
again.
more to add.
No more jokes.
Quick question, not for Christine, but just so I understand. Clear, like conditional use, future ownership change, anything like that prevents it from becoming like a rental or anything along those lines, correct?
The conditional use does not transfer with
Right.
ownership, does it, Jody?
They'd have to reapply, is that correct?
I don't think so. Scott is with us virtually. Scott, are you able to answer that?
Yeah, so typically land use approvals, like a conditional use, would continue, like it'd be a permitted use going forward, unless that was a condition that was applied to the approval.
The people in the room here and everybody watching is wondering who Scott is. Scott Taves is our Director of Planning and Engineering, and he helps guide us through some of those conversations. He's not here today, but he is joining us virtually. So in answer to your question, it would typically,
Right, it would carry over.
correct.
So then, like, I like the idea, don't get me wrong, but I'm just wondering, okay, so now, for commercial zone stuff, people wanna start putting rentals in.
Yeah, how does that work?
Like, I'm that's where I'm struggling a little bit on, I like the idea, don't get me wrong, but I'm just, in your situation makes sense. I'm just wondering, so I have a shop now and I wanna put a rental unit, and as long as I follow the rules, is that something that's gonna open up a can of worms, or do we,
As it's a conditional use, every single one of them shows up at this table.
okay?
So there would be an opportunity, as you said, this one makes sense
Yeah.
because of the situation. Each one would be evaluated individually based on the situation.
But now we approve it, and, you know, all of a sudden, your son says, I don't wanna live here anymore. And you have this suite, and you go, it's kinda nice, we'll rent it out for $1,000 a month, whatever, which is there, but I'm just wondering, now it's a rental suite, so I'm just wondering, what am I not thinking? I'm just throwing it out just to,
It's a good question.
But that could always be put into the conditional use, right?
Ultimately, difficult to police.
Right.
Because at that point in time, we're not there every day and shouldn't be there every day. I think Christine may have a thought, and I'd
Yeah.
love to hear it.
So, we had MSTW down and looking at it, there's a lot of, you know, it was really simple plan that we had, it's never that way after a little while.
It always starts simple.
Yeah, and so, another option that is available in one of your bylaws is that either you can, add above your work area or behind. So, today I was just doing a quick look at, say, a grandeur unit that if the conditional use was in place, their units are on piles. You can pick it up and move it. It is not part of the building then. It is separate. It still allows us to do what we need to do or want to do, and, but then it also has the opportunity to move it off later if the conditional use ever is done, or the business sells, someone else comes and, you know, that's just part of making it work better. I totally understand what you're saying now, and, you know, because even if we were to do it that way, would that be an option for us? But
Yeah.
I need to know that now too.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Right, that's fair.
Correct. Scott, I'm not sure if you have any thoughts on how something like that would be mitigated?
In terms of rental versus,
Correct. In terms of the
What-
intent of what we're looking at makes a lot of sense, but what happens when there's a change? How do you look at that? How do you maintain that intent of what we're looking to do here without the unintended consequences that may or may not come later?
I mean, strictly speaking from a land use perspective, whether it's owner occupied or a rental, they're gonna have the same land use impact, regardless. And so, if it was on a, like, for, the conditional use is for an accessory dwelling unit, so whether it's above or behind or somewhere on the property, I'd need to quickly double check the zoning bylaw, but I think that doesn't really matter in terms of the approval that's being applied for here today. So, it's whether we're approving the accessory dwelling unit, and then we can look at some of those conditions to investigate whether that's a better alternative. But again, from a land use perspective, whether it's a rental or owner occupied, it has
Makes no difference.
makes no difference from the land use impact side of things.
Thank you, Scott. Jody, have we talked to Chief Paetzold from a fire
Yes.
and
Yeah, and that's what guided some of the parameters that we have around doing an accessory dwelling unit in
Okay.
this type of zoning. So all of that was factored in
Okay.
when we decided to allow these type of units.
So,
Okay.
right now, this plan shows you're gonna do it within the building, correct? Because I like that idea. I'm not sure if I like the idea of moving on to, but so could you do that?
So
Move, like.
I don't think we would
render,
have anything at this point in the zoning that allows a
Likely not.
accessory residential unit. This is confined to units that are within existing building.
Okay, okay. Okay.
I had, and I don't know, like, in this accessory uses, building and structures, it's 2.3, under number 3, it talks about if it's an attached building or a detached, it has to conform to the bylaws.
Right.
And then in 4.10.2, accessory dwelling unit, commercial institutional, it says ground floor or rear of the building. Talking to MSTW, he said it'd make more sense to just add on and build back. This first one, I don't know if this is in the industrial zone. It was close to, I think, close to the other one, but, you know, if that's part of it or not. But from what I was understanding is, and what MSTW said, just add on to the back, but they might not all know your rules.
Correct.
Right.
And they should know our rules
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they're responsible on those building aspects of it. For the purpose of the discussion here today, we're looking at inside the building.
Right.
If in fact we finish here and you decide to change that differently, I would encourage you to talk to our planning and engineering department and they'll guide you to
Yeah.
that place.
Well, and I was thinking about that already last week, and she says, let's just go first with this and then
Correct.
carry on.
Yeah.
And-
Okay.
and-
Okay. Anybody else here wishing to speak? I don't see anybody else in the gallery wishing to speak. Council, comments before we close the hearing?
Good.
Be it resolved that the public hearing for conditional use number CU 2023-004 be closed. Mover?
Don Reason.
Second?
Michael?
All in favor? Carried. Be it resolved that council approve conditional use number CU 2023-003, subject to obtaining an occupancy permit for the accessory dwelling unit. Mover.
Don Fair?
Second?
Peter?
Any additional thoughts?
Yes, if I may.
Please.
Since we encouraged or opened up this possibility, and since this seems like a good idea to us at this point, but it is new to us, I'm wondering if we would add the condition that it needed to be reapplied for upon sale, just would give us a little bit more comfort down the line. It doesn't mean that we wouldn't do it, but it would just address exactly the concerns you have. It's not into perpetuity that we're opening it up, so. We're thinking of just putting that as a conditional use.
It's not bad that way if they're, because it is just something new, and then a year or two from now, we go, oh, shoot, maybe that wasn't a good idea. I don't know, like, I think it's a good idea.
Yeah.
As a
Yeah, I
condition, as a condition of sale, that it's
Condition.
reapplied.
Yeah, and how would you, I'm not sure how you'd register that on title.
I mean, a conditional use, that would hold that way. Scott, do you have any direction on, I think we have the ability to do it as Marvin Platt suggested. Do you agree?
Yeah, that would be my understanding as well. It wouldn't be registered on title. We would have to record it in our records, and so if there was an information request, we would provide that information.
So why couldn't we register that on title?
We'll
A
have,
separate development agreement would need to be generated for it, just for the purpose of registration.
Which seems like a fair amount, correct? Scott?
sorry,
So
That seems like a fairly straightforward, easy thing to do, or is that a fair amount of work that we feel could just be left as a note on this, on a transfer of sale?
I think our department's preference would be to leave it on the condition of the conditional use itself.
Not on title.
Correct. Okay, we've talked a fair amount. Are the mover and seconder okay with that amendment, that we leave that to be reapplied for on the sale of that building?
I'm just looking at this intent here, and in the last sentence, first of all, it says, "The intended first occupant is the son of the owners of Wink City Signs who is employed at the business. However, once approved, the accessory dwelling unit can be occupied by anyone in the future."
Correct.
So it could be a worker.
It could be a worker, but that doesn't mean into perpetuity. It just means as long as it's owned by that.
Right.
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
And that's what we're
Fair.
saying.
Yep.
I'd ask again, Jody, who were the mover and seconder on that?
I'm good. Me and Peter, I think.
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah.
are you good with that amendment?
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions? All in favor? Carried. Jody, back to you again.
so we have next up is a combined public hearing for rezoning and 2 variances. So I'll go through each of them before we open it up for feedback. The first is rezoning application RZ 2023003. The intent of this bylaw is to rezone the described land there, which is 224 Victoria Street, from R1 Development Reserve to R2 Residential Medium Density. Secondly, we have a variance application 2023-004, and this is in order to construct a 28-unit, 3-story, multi-unit dwelling in the proposed R2 residential medium-density zone. Variance requested is to reduce the site area from the required 33,000 square feet to 21,681, and to increase the maximum density allowed from 15 dwelling units per acre to 48 dwelling units, which is 28 per acre, I think is what it is. And this, again, is at 224 Victoria Street. Applicant is K-Block Developments on behalf of owners Frank and Irina Clausen. And then the next variance is application VA 2023005. And this is, again, in order to construct a 28-unit, 3-story multi-dwelling unit. And it's to reduce the number of required parking stalls from 42 to 20, increase the number of stories allowed from 2 to 3, again at 224 Victoria. Applicant K-Block on behalf of owners Frank and Irina Clausen. We don't have any formal objections to this. We have a note from someone who's here tonight who had some questions. I've passed that along to Frank Clausen, who will try to address those questions in his comments to council.
Okay. Thank you, Jody. Is there a proponent here who wishes to speak to it? Please.
Good evening. My name is Frank Clausen. I live in the arm of Stanley at 19074 Highway 14. First off, I want to thank you for taking the time to address this application. This project first came about when I was approached by Central Community Homes about building an affordable housing project. I asked what are the needs, like currently what are the needs for people that are looking for space, that need space. And well, we started talking about that, and they said, well, 28 units for now was a similar size project they had already gotten priced somewhere in town. They have since found a better location for that project. I still strongly think that this area, 224 Victoria, is a good location for an affordable housing project. Their list is growing of needs for affordable housing. Last week when I spoke to the board, they said they were at 120 plus applications where there's a need for affordable housing. The density here, 49 units per acre. I mean, it sounds like, okay, I want to build 49 units. That's not, not true. I would like to build 28 suites as applied. And what that works out to is, well, for starters, I could make the density sound a lot better if I just amalgamated 238 Victoria and 224 Victoria. I'll be taking possession of 238 Victoria this summer. I built that about 6-7 years ago. And so if I would amalgamate those two projects, the density calculation would sound a lot nicer, a lot less dense. At the end of the day, though, your physical size of buildings is still the same on that square footage of land, right? So the 224 Victoria title already has a cross-access agreement registered on 238 Victoria, which I did back when I built it, so that there could be a shared roadway coming in. I'd always intended to build multifamily here at some point, should that be allowed. And another benefit of keeping the two titles separate as opposed to amalgamating them would be that you can have separate ownership of one or the other, right? Wouldn't need to be all one owner owning the 6 suites plus whatever we build here. I want to just highlight a couple things out of my letter to support this development. The requested rezoning would be compatible with the surrounding neighborhood, which consists predominantly of R1 zoning with some R2 and R3 zoning dispersed throughout the area. Diagonally across from 224 Victoria is a small park with an R3 lot adjacent to it. Traffic impacts would be low, as it is assumed that not all tenants would own vehicles. The proposed lot on Victoria Street is a great location for affordable housing because it is located within walking distance to some services such as groceries, clinic, recreational facilities, and a very key factor is jobs. A lot of people would be able to walk to the jobs that are in that area. The majority of the proposed 28 rental units would be one bedroom, which reflects current affordable housing needs. According to the National Building Code of Canada, occupant load is calculated as 2 persons per bedroom, which would result in a maximum occupant load of 72 persons for the proposed project. So the 28 suites, it would be a maximum of 72 persons per, if each bedroom had two people there,
People,
right?
yep.
So this would be an equivalent to an 18-suite, 2-bedroom apartment, where if you use those same calculations, an 18-suite, 2-bedroom apartment would be the same as this 28-suite building that we're proposing. Just simply, I could, again, make it sound a lot better by just applying for 18 suites and making them 2 bedrooms. You wouldn't, the end result, you'd have that same amount of people as a 28-suite apartment. Where do I get these stats from? Well, some of my own inventory, and I shared this with the planning department, is that out of 18 2-bedroom suites, 50% are occupied by a single person. Out of 11 1-bedroom suites, 8 of them are occupied by a single person. So I think there's a very large growing demand of 1-bedroom suites. Simply from my own inventory that and I'm not managing these that I'm picking, okay, I'm just picking one person for this dwelling. I have On Point Properties and Big Tree Properties that are managing them. So, you know, in terms of parking, we're proposing, it sounds again harsh, to reduce the parking. Our proposal shows 23 parking stalls. 2 of them are not, I mean, I know the application shows 20, I think, but that's because a few would need to be removed if we add the additional parking in the back. We do have a plan. I don't know if you see it on your drawing. It's outlined very lightly in the back, south end of the lot, where we could add an additional 11 parking stalls if there was a need. Again, if I look at my own inventory, a number of the 1-bedroom units, people actually don't have a car. So if the need is there, then I would gladly build it. It's just this would be an aspect of affordability, so I could construct it more affordable at the start, right? So our goal is to be able to get to at least minimum of 20% of the affordable rents so that we can support that. I couldn't do the whole project, you just can't financially sustain it. So yeah, I'd like to just kindly ask that you consider this project. I think it fits the context there, just pointing out that people could walk to work. A couple of comments on the site plan. I'd like to point out that we're going above the minimum setbacks, right? So from a side yard, we pushed the building over to 20 feet instead of 5 feet. From the rear yard, what would be required is 25 feet, and we're proposing 62 feet. Height, anyone in that neighborhood could right now build a 35-foot building height, up to 2 stories. So the question is really not the building height, it's the 2-story or 3-story dwellings, right? Our building height would be 33 feet. As for the neighborhood there, like the 238 Victoria, I was approached by a different business in the community that is looking for housing for their employees. They've said that, okay, if the people are willing to stay long-term and want to sign a lease, like we can work with that. Those that could find something else, that there would be 3 months minimum notice given. Again, that, you know, we can work with them, right? I visited the neighbor across the street, directly across from 224 Victoria, and his concern was parking along the street because of snow clearing. I said, I understand that. Like, the public parking, I can't control on the street. Anybody can park all along there, right? And this would add to it. So if it became a big concern, I would gladly, again, build more parking in the back. Most often, these types of developments, the concern is, okay, my property will be depreciated. I've never yet seen new construction depreciate the neighboring values. Multifamily is not desired anywhere. I've built on Victoria before, and the comment was, go to the highway. I went to the highway, we had this chamber full, right, of opposition, and what I've got there is a church to two sides of it, a highway on one side, a school to the other side, and it was, you know, I've rezoned or applied to rezone in numerous locations, and this type of housing isn't welcomed. It's unfortunate, but I think if we build a community with mixing it in, the whole community has a higher value than if you isolate them to one area. So, yeah, I think that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, do we have any questions of Frank at this point?
Yeah, I guess, because you mentioned a few times the fact that if parking became an issue, that you would be willing to construct the parking spots in the rear. So how would you propose that be a condition, or how would you propose that would go on? And the decision would be made whether it was necessary or not.
Well, if there's enough complaints that would come in, or if I see the need from tenants themselves, right? Like, my proposal would be to like, I don't manage these units. They would be managed by a property manager, locals, and they would address, I guess, contact me about it. It could be addressed in a development agreement too.
I guess if you have enough empty units wanting parking, then you would put
Right.
parking in.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
you
not
Yeah.
Yeah.
against it.
Well, I guess it could also be the neighbors that were saying, hey, there's way too much parking on the street here.
Right, that could
And-
be too, right? If
yeah.
too many complaints are coming
Yeah.
in, that the streets piled up.
I like the creativeness of the whole presentation and the size of the units. It's interesting. Some are decent size and some are quite small, but you don't need a lot of space for one person, right? But the parking was my concern as well, and if it could be put into the development agreement, that when your tenants or you or the city needs or sees a need for more parking, that we address it then.
Certainly. Absolutely. Scott, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I'll just bring your attention to our report when we're talking about parking. In there, we do have a comment in there that we can include a condition in a development agreement, whether it's a 2-year review after occupancy or whatever time frame that is, or whenever the building is full, to determine what those parking demands are, and can then either require the developer to provide that parking that has been kind of shadow planned onto the site plan.
Thank you, Scott.
So if, if this were to be approved with the wording of the resolution, with the development agreement per terms and conditions of the report to council, then we would be able to include that in the development agreement.
Okay. Any other questions of Frank before we give others an opportunity to speak?
I'm good.
I'll say thank you for now, Frank. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to this project?
I would like to, my name is Herman Ginter, live on 263 Victoria Street. I would like to ask the gentleman that just sat down, does he live on Victoria Street?
No, I live in the Armistead.
Okay. Well, I have lived on Victoria Street for, I would say, close to 40 years now. And I have seen a very big increase in traffic volume on Victoria Street. The one big thing that I have noticed is the subtle lights that the city has put up on Pembina and First Street. People try to go around those lights, so therefore they come down Victoria Street. Not just trucks and cars. I'm talking half tons pulling full-size trailers, 23-footers, 4 feet, 30-footers, coming down Victoria Street. I've also seen on Victoria Street, when the snow flies, people park on the sides. I realize the city cannot touch those vehicles that are on the side. They don't seem to, nobody seems to be doing anything about the parallel parking that's going on there. And I'd like to be able to say that we need to get something else done here. These rental properties, they are rental properties, is that not correct?
Correct, that's the intent, yeah.
Yes.
The response was that that is correct, and I'll just speak it in because not everybody is here, and we do record each one of our meetings, so I just wanted to make sure that that showed up.
Is this building that we're talking about, is it one building or is it going to be several buildings?
It's one building according to the plans
One
that we
building.
have in front of us.
So the way I understand this is there's going to be 28 units in there, right?
That is the proposal, correct?
And he's talking about a single dwelling people, like single people going to be living there, and that's all?
And I think he was suggesting, and maybe I would ask Frank to respond. I don't want to speak for you, but I'll ask you to come again to the podium to speak to that, Frank, if you don't mind, please.
Yes, so what I'm finding is that on average, a one-bedroom unit has a single person living there. And actually, a number of my two-bedroom units of my own inventory has a single person living there. Yeah. So I'm not saying that there couldn't be two people living in
Right.
in a one-bedroom, I'm just using an average step. Yeah.
Well, I've never gone to any of these kind of meetings before, but I don't agree with this. To me, this doesn't add up. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Herman. It sounds like a lot of your concerns are greater community concerns as well in terms of traffic coming down that street that may or may not have anything to do with anybody living down your street.
Well, there seems to be an awful lot of parking going on down there. And the grader can't do a decent job of cleaning Victoria Street. It just can't. I've been there, and it hasn't been very good at all.
Okay.
Henry?
We've made a note of that here as well, and we'll take a look at that. So thank you for those comments. Is there anybody else who would like to
Henry,
speak?
if I may,
Sorry,
address the
Jody.
parking. So we do have a new bylaw for snow clearing that will prohibit parking on streets during snow clearing events. And we are planning to implement that this coming fall when the first snow starts to fly. So that's something that will be implemented, and that will allow us to address one of your concerns, which is a problem throughout the city, as the mayor mentioned, where we have lots of issues with clearing around parked vehicles on the street. So we're hoping that that's going to make a big difference in our ability to keep the streets clear of snow.
I'll give an opportunity to anyone else who would like to speak.
Good evening. I know you were expecting me, so here I am.
Hi, Ange.
Ange Brown, 206 Victoria Street. So I come every time I see a yellow sign, you guys know that already. So I would like to commend Frank. Like Frank, you've got awesome projects. I think they're creative. They're not just in Winkler. We see them in Plum Coulee. We see them in Altona. The need for housing is huge. And
Right.
Frank is 100% right. Single people are pretty much priced out of the market. Like trying to find a place to live out here is extremely difficult. So I'm not going to argue about that because that's the reality. This project, however, looks a bit ambitious to me. 28 units seems a lot, and 28 times 2 people, even if maybe not 2 people, 72 people is a lot. 72 cars would be a lot.
Yes.
I agree with Frank as well that many people don't have a car. Like people living in affordable housing often can't afford a car, may not even have a driver's license. However, they could, and they could get there because that's mostly, we know living in rural, you need to have a car. Until we have a public transit system of some kind, you need a car. So that is a potential that could happen. So looking at the 2 stories, I was looking at 3 stories thinking, could this be a 2-story building? Would that make it more palatable? I think it would fit in better on the street, like a 2-story. Just thinking about the look of the landscape, when I picture the 3 versus the 2, it does reduce the number of units, but I think it might be a decent compromise to make, keeping the same number of parking spots that have already been talked about. The additional spots plus the ones that are already, like the 23, I think you said, Frank? Something along that line, I think would make sense. I guess it sort of feels like, when I said it's ambitious, it feels like this was zoned R1. The variances make it we're asking for R2, but it feels like R3. So I'm not sure if that's a trick, but it's something seems a little bit hanky with that part. I also agree with Herman. The amount of parking on the street is a lot, and there's lots and lots of heaps of snow that sit there pretty much all winter, because of the parking. A few years back, Ben Rempel did a project on our street. I was here then too, I'm pretty sure. And it's turned out to be quite a lovely project. It has fit in well on the street. Density-wise, we haven't noticed. I think it's 9 units, but there are families in the units. The parking, those apartments have enough parking, and people are parking where they're supposed to at their apartments. They're not on the street. It looks good, and the garbage and recycling is very well taken care of as well. It's discreet, it's on the street, but it's very discreet and cleaned up. So it can be done, and it can look really, really good. And I know that Frank's projects do look good. So I wouldn't expect anything less than that, but 2 might be better than 3 when it comes to the number of stories. Yeah, and I think the other thing Jody has already mentioned, the snow removal. If that parking ban exists, like if that's going to happen, awesome. That part falls on the city. Frank can't do anything about that, but I think most of us would welcome that, and hopefully that results in not only tickets, but actually a towing, because people won't do it twice then. Yeah, and then the last piece around the amount of traffic, I also agree with Herman about that. People trying to beat that. That started around the time when we changed that intersection, like when there was that major street work that happened
Right.
to put those lights in. So people started playing that game at that point in time. So our street got really beat up. Like if you drive down it, you'll feel like you're on a country road. It's really beat up. But that has persisted. So one of the things that has changed on our street, other than that intersection, was a number of years back when Red Robin Lane was put in, it was put in as a one-way. So there was no exit from Red Robin Lane onto Victoria. And that might be something to reconsider as far as reducing traffic. I'm not sure why it changed. It just did one day. There was people going both ways. A stop sign went up, and so it was no longer a one-way. But that may help a bit. I think that is all of my points.
So the one-way consideration, possibly even Victoria could be a one-way, is that?
That I don't love.
Okay.
No, I don't love that.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I can understand that could be potentially, it might serve, yeah. Yeah, you'd probably just have people just diverted, kind of the same as what happened during the,
Right.
yeah.
And it's interesting now that we have 2 residents say that this started during a construction period and it didn't stop.
Yes.
Because we all find our route
Yes.
that we go, and once we've taught someone to go a route, it takes something now to change
Yes,
that
yes.
route again.
And the Red Robin Lane, even switching that, although I have debated, does that just give them more speed if they come right from the end of the street then down the
Right.
whole street versus coming off halfway through? Like,
Right.
I'm not sure, but it was one of the thoughts that I had,
Okay,
so.
I appreciate that. Does anyone have questions of Ange?
Not a question of Ange, but there was one intersection, and maybe you can help me understand, that where we found that there was a problem of U-turns for people making left turns where we didn't initially.
Yeah,
That was at
something-
the corner of Albert.
That's not this one then?
That was by Stanley there by the temple.
Stanley
Okay,
Albert.
right,
But
yeah.
it is now, just so you know. Now it's just at the end of our street.
Yeah,
Like they've
there-
just-
There is no U-turn.
So where you took the U-turn sign away from Albert,
Right.
it just came, now the U-turns are all happening at Victoria, which is safer because there's no crosswalk there.
And there's a
And
turning
there's a
lane.
turning lane,
Turning lane,
which is
yeah.
that one
Okay, yeah.
piece.
That was just for clarification,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay, is there
So-
anyone else who would, sorry, Don?
I just had a question like this, as far as living down the street, do you have like, is there a lot more people speeding along there that, more than normal, or,
I agree,
yeah?
yes. There's a lot of children on that street.
So,
So Herman's response to the question was that there is a lot more speeding.
okay, so would it help to put a children's, at play signs there that?
There is.
Oh, there is,
There's one at the
okay,
park.
Playground.
okay,
And the response again was that there is already signage there.
okay.
And the reason, again, I say each one of that, for everyone else who's watching, if we are not hearing it from the microphone, they can't necessarily hear it. So I'm just repeating it for that reason.
Very good.
So in regards to Ange's comment about the height of the building, has there been any concern from the neighbor to the west at 212 Victoria?
I think Frank owns that one too.
Okay. Is there anyone else here who wishes to speak to this? Please, if you, oh, you've sent a note, is that right?
Yeah,
Jody?
so I shared some of these notes with Frank. Some of them don't relate so much to the public hearing. They ask about when this might start, when,
And the comments came from whom, Jody?
this is from Audrey A. Guckenberger at 238 Victoria Street.
Thank you, Jody.
And so, when are you putting cement on the parking lot? When do you start raising rent? So some of these don't pertain to the particulars of the public hearing. I think, like, who do you send the rent to? So those are some questions that I would encourage you to talk to Frank after, because they don't really pertain
Correct.
to the approval of these applications.
And so in that note, is there anything?
I'm just gonna browse through and see if there's something.
Please.
Frank, maybe you could address, if you could come up, this one I'll ask you. It sounds like there's a plan to tear down the fence, then where are the friends or family to park? Do you know?
Yeah.
The context of
Currently,
that?
there's a fence in between 224 Victoria and 238. Very beat-up fence. The goal would be to tear that fence down. Because we have a cross-access agreement on that roadway in on 238 Victoria, we'd be planning to cement that roadway in and to cement the parking onto 224 Victoria.
Okay.
The parking for 238 Victoria, whether those stalls would get cemented is to be determined. Like I said, there was somebody reaching out that really needs some housing for their employees, and I could certainly talk to them about that.
Okay,
As for, there would be proper notices given if anyone needed to evict, right? But also open to long-term leases. If people love to stay there, we can come to an agreement, right?
Okay.
okay. And is this, are there any rules about, is it just for seniors or it's open to anyone?
Open to anyone, actually. Yeah, all age groups,
Okay,
whatever the need is.
Also comment from the same person that also agrees with cars and trucks going fast down the street. And then lastly, last question here was, can't you find another area to do this building?
You know, it's so difficult to find an area to do multifamily, to build what I like to build. I'd like to build a nice community, within community, to have it interconnected, you know, walkable. Like you see in this proposal, we've built a common room there just for the community to connect. They can't maybe afford it on their own unit, but this would be part of what we'd be supplying there, right? So.
One more comment just on traffic, if I may.
Please.
I think I would just like people to know that I think our Transportation and Utilities Committee would be open to talking about traffic concerns down the street, because it's not just because of this development, there's other concerns. So those are things that we look at from time to time as people raise concerns. So I think it's fair to say that we could bring this one to committee to talk about what steps could be taken to mitigate the traffic concerns here.
Particularly because of the fact we've heard it 3 times
Yep.
from 3 speakers, so.
Yeah,
Thanks, Jody, you beat me to that
okay,
comment.
sorry.
No,
Frank,
it's
if
good.
you have a comment, I'll again ask you to come.
Just in terms of the reduction to back down to 2-story, it would make quite a substantial difference for me to reduce it that much in terms of trying to get it to be affordable, right? So that would reduce the amount of units quite a bit. I think height-wise, you know, does it fit the context? You know, with a hip roof, or the way we've built, we had been in some discussion, and the apartments on Main Street, Westwind Apartments, it has a square roof, and it just feels taller. I think as soon as you put a roof on with an overhang and a hip, it just makes it feel more residential-like, right? Like I don't think the height of the building is way out of context there. There's a number of 2-story buildings along the street already.
I have some more questions.
Okay,
Besides
Herman?
This Red Robin Lane that used to be Red Robin Lane. This is now a 2-way street. Right beside it on the, I guess it would be on the left, there's a 4-plex. Now, from what I understand, the 4-plex was asked for 8. At that point in time, the city, what I understood, did not have the capacity for sewage to carry a 4 more plexes. So now I'm asking the same question. Can the city take care of sewage from all these other apartments now?
Okay, I'll ask maybe Scott if you have a comment towards that. Do we have an ability to service this project?
Yeah, so we have done a further review on our sewer capacity for that neighborhood development. I'm not sure of the particulars of the 4-plex versus 8-plex that's being referred to, and when that was constructed, but we have since had a closer look at our capacity, and also considering that the less people per unit has been factored into that as well. Relative to a single-family home in Winkler, there are more people in a single-family dwelling unit than there would be in a multi-unit dwelling unit, and that was also factored in as well.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Is there anyone else here who would like to speak to this project? Not seeing anything further. Council, do you have additional thoughts before we close the hearing? Knowing that when we close the hearing, we debate amongst ourselves and we don't necessarily talk to our public after that. So if we have additional questions or thoughts, now would be the time to ask those. Not seeing any, and not seeing anybody. Herman, you have one more thought?
Yes. Is there a no truck route on the top of the street? That I haven't noticed yet. I'm wondering, because I do see highway tractors also come down Victoria Street. There's one this past winter, there was a tractor sitting on the side of the street, down close to George Street and on Victoria Street.
Was that just a tractor or was it a tractor?
Just a tractor, mind you, yes, it was.
Okay.
But even those vehicles are pretty heavy.
We do have, and we do have a bylaw that allows, with the exception of the spring thaw, for tractor trailers or tractors to drive on residential streets. Jody, I'm not sure if you've got the details specifically on that. The truck routes
Yeah.
are attached here.
Yeah.
But for somebody who lives in a residential area, for them to take their tractor home on our residential streets outside of the spring thaw,
That's
we
right.
do allow that.
Yep, correct.
How about parking on the street?
Not
That same
parking.
tractor parking on the street.
I don't believe they can park on the street, but I'll ask Scott or Jody if you know the details of that one better. I believe you can't park it on the street though, Ange.
I would have to verify that. I don't have that offhand.
Can I put you on the spot, Scott? Do you know that one offhand?
Offhand, no, but I can find the answer shortly here.
And we can communicate that to you directly, Ange. But I don't believe you're allowed to park it on the street. You have to park it on your driveway.
Yeah, I think that's correct.
Okay, not seeing anybody else at the microphone. Council has no further questions that I can see now. Be it resolved that the combined public hearing for rezoning number RZ 2023-003 and variation number VA 2023-004 and variation number VA 2023-005 be closed. Mover?
Don Friesen?
Second?
Andrew?
Any additional comments? All in favor? And that is closed. We will then continue, be it resolved that rezone number RZ 2023-003 be given second reading. Mover?
Michael?
Second.
Peter?
Comments? All in favor?
Hold on. Oh, there's all of them in a row here?
Yeah,
Okay.
they're all in a nice neat row.
So the rezoning puts it to R3?
The rezoning goes to R2
R2.
residential medium density,
Okay.
and then the variances deal with the rest of it.
Okay. But this is more than R2, is it not?
That's what creates the variance.
Yep.
Okay, so why wouldn't they just go right to R3?
Scott had a note.
Don't recall.
It says on,
I think,
it's got a note on page 2 there. R3 would allow up to 35 units per acre, and there's only capacity for 25. That's in staff.
Yeah,
report.
so- So I can clarify that.
If you would.
Yeah, Michael, that's the exact reason. So also understanding that, buildings also don't last forever. And I understand we're looking long-term on the rezoning, that the sewer capacity is only up to that 25 dwelling units an acre, and didn't want to have an R3 zone necessarily that would allow that to be redeveloped at even a higher density, much, much further into the future as well. And that's why the variance was there to allow it to go to a more dense development.
so it prevents further densification in the future if we would have rezoned it as R3.
Right.
And just to answer a previous question, there is section 3.7 in our traffic and parking bylaw that does not allow, like any trucks over 15,000 pounds or semi-trailers of any type to be parked on any street in Winkler.
There
So,
we go.
other than for loading and unloading, right? But, yeah.
Right, so this is more than 35
hence the variance,
Okay.
right? But it doesn't allow, if we zoned it R3, they wouldn't have to come back to council in order to increase densification.
Right, I see, yeah, I see that. Okay. That's interesting.
The future planning piece.
I know it's for,
Protection
it's for,
piece.
it's for protection of sewer, I see that, but, okay.
What is the, what does this come out to? I forget. What was it per
48.47.
48.47 per
Correct.
acre.
But they're saying that if they go to R2, since there's only sewer water capacity for up to 25
Mhm.
per acre, they would have denied R3.
Can you help us understand that one a little bit more, Scott?
Yeah, so it's dwelling unit equivalents. Keeping in mind that a single bedroom does not have the same water and sewer impact as a 2 or 3 or a 4 bedroom
Right.
apartment would as well.
So if you normally look at 25 dwelling units at an average of 2.7 people, that has been adjusted for the type of building that this is to
Right.
1.57 people per dwelling
Does
unit.
that affect the rest of the neighborhood as well then?
In terms of future capacity,
Correct.
I think I think the point is to stay within those numbers per acre. So this doesn't say it uses up all capacity, but that we don't want more than that in terms of densification per property.
Okay. Fair enough. Frank wants to say something?
And I know it is that
Oh, he can't, no, never mind.
hearing is closed,
It is.
so I apologize.
Oh, hold
Thank
on.
you.
Okay, thanks.
Continuing on then, we passed second reading. We're now moving to be it resolved that rezoning number RZ 2023-003 be given third and final reading subject to a development agreement. Terms and conditions of the required development agreement will be in accordance with the recommendations made in the city's report. Mover.
Michael.
Reason?
Michael got it. Don is a second. My question to you, Jody, would be, do those terms and conditions require that 2-year review of parking spaces to see whether or not what we have is enough?
Correct. That's what we'll have in the development agreement.
Okay.
Yep.
And that would be, the city would decide whether.
Correct.
Okay, good.
That would be
Yeah.
something very much that I would like to have in there. Okay, other thoughts or comments? Marvin?
I don't know if it could be part of the development agreement, but a commitment by the city to look at concerns already addressed currently in terms of traffic and so on, that, as you were already mentioning, that we could discuss that, just a commitment from us to address that.
In our opinion as staff, the traffic concerns are, this one property is only a small part of the overall traffic concerns, and we would feel that that should be dealt with outside of this.
And I would suggest
These
further to that,
applications.
the concerns are there today.
Yes.
To your concerns, Marvin, absolutely, the city needs to get
Yeah.
involved and find out what that looks like and to mitigate the concerns that the neighborhood already has before
Agreed.
anything else happens. It would be
Agreed.
difficult to put it into a development
Right,
agreement.
no, because I was saying, because this is on us, not on
Correct.
the developer.
Correct.
That's right.
And I think we've heard that. I think everybody who came to the microphone spoke to that concern today. It's not a future concern, it's a today concern. We've got that, Jody's got that, and he and his staff will take a look at it, and I suspect we'll see it at Transportation Committee at some point in time in the not too distant future.
Correct.
So my question is, if this whole neighborhood would apply for R2, is that feasible? Is that possible?
Again,
Can I give
Scott?
you a lawyerly answer?
Please.
It depends. Because the context, even with R2,
True.
it depends on the type of densities that are applied for.
Fair.
So in any one of these, we'll report back to council on the capacity of the sewer at that time.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Ready for the question? All in favor? That is carried. We then proceed to, we've got a couple more times left here.
Okay.
Be it resolved that council approve variance number VA 2023-004, subject to a development agreement. Terms and conditions of the required development agreement will be in accordance with the city's recommendations made in the city's report to council. Mover.
Marvin.
Second. Don Friesen. Thoughts or comments?
Yeah, I don't know. I think Frank already said he didn't want 2 stories, but residences want 2 stories. But typically, that's how that always works, is that
The problem then is not affordable housing anymore.
correct?
Yeah.
But only 20% was going to be affordable to start.
Yeah, but yeah, you're right, as tagged as affordable housing under the government's thing, but once you, like as a developer, once you only put, a third less units on there, obviously every unit per is cost a lot more money. And I know,
I do understand this area is very good for people who want to work in the industrial area and can still get there fairly easily with their own 2 feet.
Are these saleable units, or are these just all rentals?
Rentals.
This will be a rental.
Rentals. So how is the rent, how has it become more affordable whether you have fewer or more suites?
Cost of building, the
your
more
land
suite.
cost is fixed, so.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because you're splitting your land costs
But
among,
your rent is always whatever the market bears, right?
Well, but there's 20% of them will be based on, I think through the CMHC programming, I think it's based, whatever the government deems as affordable, whatever that number is. But they have to have.
Have we put any of that into the development agreement?
I don't think we have control over regulating rent.
no.
No, but certainly if that's part of the selling feature, then whether or not we look at control over regulating rent, ultimately, if that's the sales pitch, then I think there is some consideration that we want to have.
Yeah,
And I have zero interest in policing rent and telling people what they can and cannot charge. But if the selling feature is affordability, how do we tackle that affordability?
We have,
I mean, I think Don Friesen's right, like, whether it's rented or not, the land costs are fixed, and the ability to do something like this ultimately comes down on numbers. So if you can get more dwelling units, it does make it more affordable. Like, the building still has to get paid for, and the rent will be set somewhat in accordance with the cost of building so that they can make it feasible. So, the cost to put it up is going to affect the amount of rent.
Yeah, I thought,
But if he's got, say, what was it, 20% of them at, say they're geared towards social housing, and then after it's all done, they kind of backpedal on that, and then it's all market rent, that kind of becomes the, kind of that feel-good story today, but they get to capitalize on it later, where the flip side, maybe if it was all market rent, maybe you look at 2 stories instead of 3, without the social component.
And I think the one challenge that we have here is we completely eliminate the possibility
Right.
of those being affordable if we don't leave that opportunity to be there.
So what if we then make a condition within the development agreement that a minimum of 20% be considered for affordable?
Are the mover,
We can do that
by government standards.
by government standards, yeah.
are the mover and seconder okay with that addition?
I thought did he not say 20% of the units would be,
That was the plan that he's built, yes.
yeah, somewhere, because I thought he put that on his one letter.
Was it in the letter, or did he
But
make that?
I can't
He
find
said
it.
it
That was in his
I believe
presentation.
Yeah.
that was today that he presented. I'll ask again, are the mover and seconder okay with that addition as a condition?
Yeah, 20% of the units be affordable as per whatever government.
Okay, by the government, yep.
Yeah, they
The
have a
formulas
rule.
that they have. for
Yeah, they
affordable
have
housing.
formulas, yeah.
I see yeses there. Jody, you'll make that addition.
Yep.
Further comments? All in favor? Carried. Be it resolved that council approve variance number VA 2023-005, subject to a development agreement. Terms and conditions of the required development agreement will be in accordance with the city's recommendations made in the city's report to council. Mover.
Peter?
Second.
Don?
Thoughts? Comments? All in favor? And we're carried. Be it resolved that public hearings be adjourned and the regular council reconvene. Mover?
Michael?
Second.
Andrew?
All in favor? Carried. Moving into other business, there is none. Questions from the media or public relevant to this meeting of council? Not seeing any. Wendy, do we have anybody online? We do not. Be it resolved that this regular meeting of council be adjourned. Mover? Don Fair, second.
Peter?
Peter Fraze, all in favor? We are